This sound will be heard by millions of people on a daily basis. This is going to be the future sound of the London urban bus. This was an opportunity to make a sound that was not only safe, but also beautiful. Something that would make the city a nicer, more pleasant and safer place to be. Something that would be a new icon for TFL, an audible roundel, a mind the gap, a unique branding, safety and creative exercise. We wanted to achieve something that felt totally familiar, but like nothing you've ever heard. An AVAS, Acoustic Vehicle Alerting System, will be a mandatory requirement by July 2021. Electric buses are virtually silent when travelling below 20 kilometres per hour, and so need to make a sound for safety reasons. But the forward-thinking and safety-conscious TFL wanted to implement this on their next wave of electric buses, coming at the start of 2020. Zelig were instructed by TFL to lead the sound design of the AVAS project in collaboration with Anderson Acoustics, who were advising from an environmental soundscape perspective, and AECOM, who were overseeing the regulatory requirements and providing measurement data. As soon as we were involved in the project, we saw the potential to impact the sound of the city for the better. No more cranking diesel explosions, no more rattles and vibrations, no more engine sounds associated with toxicity and pollution. And as an artist, the possibility of creating something that could affect our environment and people's lives for the better, and could also be described as a city-wide minimalist sound installation, was amazing. Along with Anderson Acoustics, we defined the brief: to create an AVAS London bus sound that is synonymous with TFL's brand position and values, whilst at the same time adhering to emerging safety regulations. It encapsulates London, our heritage, our future, our city. Using sonic mood boards and auditing the existing AVAS sound landscape, we explored and discovered possible directions and potential hurdles. The creation of the sound. Our original set of sounds were all tonal and textural variations of looping pads or drones. In the process of creating dozens of different sounds, we discovered we were naturally drawn to ones with these similar components: a low-frequency subtle rhythm or modulation, a subtle textural complementary pad, and a subtle modulating high-frequency component. Throughout the process of creating the first batch of sounds, we landed on certain harmonies or chords and frequency ranges that felt like the right direction. They were subtly musical and still interesting on a continuous loop. We ended up focusing on certain octaves for selected parts of the sound. For example, if the pad chord is transposed too low, it gets muddy and harder to hear in the environment. Too high, and it becomes irritating or draws too much attention to itself. Doing this process on literally hundreds of sounds, we developed some sweet spots harmonically and texturally. Prior to the stakeholder workshops, the project team rated these sound options against the expanded brief and selected just a handful of sounds to present during the workshops. The participants were then presented with these sounds in a random order in an attempt to avoid sequence bias. All the sounds were played in acoustically modelled scenarios: a busy high street with multiple buses, a quiet residential street at a bus stop, and in a bus garage with multiple buses. All were presented in AECOM's simulation software and with calibrated headphones. We learned so much from these different stakeholder workshops, each time taking the verbal and written feedback of the participants and iterating on the sounds they heard and creating new ones. The standout bit of feedback was from the stakeholders with vision impairment. They voiced that they required a more rhythmic sound or impulse to help the sound stand out above the ambient sound of the city and for localization. As soon as we heard this feedback and glimpsed an insight into how crucial the sound could be for people who rely on their hearing, we knew what we had to do. This is where the beacon part of the sound came from. We started testing various rhythms, adding to our existing popular sounds and creating some additional sounds from scratch. We ended up with another 10 sounds that we then took into a final round of studio-based, more hands-on workshops. From here, the majority of the sounds were positively received, and we were excited to test them out in field trials in Tottenham Hale, London. In order to test the sounds on the bus, we had to tune or mix the sounds specifically for the proposed speaker being used, which had a very narrow frequency response, and also take into account that the sound subtly pitches up as the bus accelerates and lowers when it decelerates, at a rate of 0.6% per kilometre. It was at this point we decided to pitch the sound down by 2 semitones. By pitching the starting frequency down, you would hear the ideal version of the sound when the bus was travelling at its average speed. The field trials were really useful creatively, allowing us to hear the sounds on a moving bus and not just using the AVAS speaker in studio. This process, along with stakeholder feedback, helped us to modify, refine and eventually land on our hero sound. It was these field trials that introduced the idea of having both a stationary and moving sound. Originally, participants at a distance were not 100% sure when the bus was stationary or moving. Splitting the sound into the stationary and moving or beacon layers solved this problem. This is the sound of the bus when it's stationary. And we add the beacon layer as soon as the bus moves. Lastly, we had to set the minimum and maximum playback levels of the sound and speaker in preparation for the EU Regulation 138 testing. And that's it. As far as the next steps go, we're looking into rolling out a new improved speaker so the sound reproduction is of the best possible quality. TFL are also exploring options to adjust the sound level output based on the bus location. For example, playing at a lower sound level in a quieter location and a higher level in a busier setting. The concept of creating a completely new engine noise outside the restraints of what a vehicle traditionally sounds like was a really interesting and nuanced challenge. We're looking forward to hearing the buses on streets and hopefully contributing to making the city a nicer and safer place to be.